Okay, so we are reading Many Masters, Many Lives by Dr. Brian Weiss. We are on chapter 3, page number 25 of the PDF.
Chapter 3.
Yeah, sorry, chapter 3 of the book and 25 of the PDF.
1 week later, Catherine bounced into my office for her next hypnosis session. Beautiful to begin with, she was more radiant than ever. She happily announced that her lifelong fear of drowning had disappeared. Her fears of choking were somewhat diminished. Her sleep was no longer interrupted by the nightmare of a collapsing bridge. Although she had remembered the details of her past life recall, she had not yet truly integrated the material.
So again, when you remember a traumatic event, when you understand what it is from a better state of consciousness, then automatically the trauma disappears. Okay, this is something that happens when we are going into altered states of consciousness in focus 10, 12, 15, and 21, and of course in 27. It happens during hypnosis, it happens during biofield tuning. In fact, in the PD, you learn a process by which you can actually go to that point and then rehash it from there. So this is a very, very normal way of, healing stuff, going back to the point of inception and then clearing it from there.
The concepts of past lives and reincarnation were alien to her cosmology, and yet her memories were so vivid, the sights and sounds and smells so clear, the knowledge that she was there so powerful and immediate that she felt she must have actually been there. She did not doubt this. The experience was so overwhelming. Yet she was concerned about how this fit in with her upbringing and her beliefs.
So again, whenever we are having these memories and when we want to peg something into our state of consciousness, having access to all the senses, right? When you integrate all the senses, the memory becomes even more powerful. So like suppose you went to Taj Mahal and you smelt a smell there. There was someone singing something over there. You felt the flowers or you touched the marble in the Taj Mahal, right? You felt it. You may have eaten maybe chana chur or something over there. So all those tastes and that sounds, that integrate that memory into your consciousness. So when we are having these memories, the more sensory perception that is added to that memory, the more vivid it tends to become.
During the week, I had reviewed my textbook from a comparative religions course taken during my freshman year at Columbia. There were indeed references to reincarnation in the Old and New Testaments. In AD 325, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, along with his mother Helena, had deleted references to reincarnation contained in the New Testament.
So this is important, right? So in the Old Testament, in the Christian religion, reincarnation was actually mentioned. When they had the meeting in Constantine, they actually deleted it because the church wanted to keep authority. Now, if someone someone is going to come back and will have a reincarnation, then the power of the church gets diminished, right? Because they have no control over that person because he has another life to deal with his issues, right? So they actually deleted all the mention of reincarnation from the Bible.
The Second Council of Constantinople, meeting in AD 553, confirmed this action and declared the concept of reincarnation a heresy. Apparently, they thought this concept would weaken the growing power of the church by giving humans too much time to seek salvation. Yet, the original references had been there. The early church fathers had accepted the concept of reincarnation. The early Gnostics, Clement of Alexandria, Origen, Saint Jerome, and many others believed that they had lived before and would again.
So again, the concept of reincarnation was there.
I, however, had never believed in reincarnation. Actually, I had never really spent much time thinking about it, although my earlier religious training taught about some kind of vague existence of the soul after death. I was not convinced about this concept.
Okay. So Sufia has asked why this was deleted. So what the reason it was deleted was that today, if someone has, will be coming back, right? So someone made a sin, let's say. Now, in Christian religion, now you have to bear the burdens of your sins right now. And if you go to the church and confess your sins, then your sins are forgiven, right? Now, that gives a lot of power to the church. So everyone has to go for confession in the Christian religion. And when you go for a confession, you naturally make a donation, right? So that allowed the church to control the society. That's why they removed all the mention of reincarnation, because if someone is going to be reborn, then they don't have to deal with all their sins in the present birth. They always have the next birth to be able to deal with it. That's the reason why it was all deleted from the Bible. So, if does that answer your question? Yeah.
I was the
Sony,
oldest
sorry.
I was the oldest of four children, all spaced 3 years apart. We belonged to a conservative Jewish synagogue in Red Bank, a small town near the New Jersey seashore. I was the peacemaker and statesman in my family. My father was more involved with religion than the rest of us were. He took it very seriously, as he took all of life. His children's academic achievements were the greatest joys in his life. He was easily upset by household discord and would withdraw, leaving me to mediate. Although this turned out to be excellent preparatory training for a career in psychiatry, my childhood was heavier and more responsible than, in retrospect, I would have preferred. I emerged from it as a very serious young man, one who got used to taking on too much responsibility.
So our childhood always has a bearing in what is happening in our life when we grow up. And at the end of the day, in my view and perception, everything happens for a reason. There is no reason why there's never not any reason why something happens. The point is, we need to understand why that something happened to us. Maybe it's the worst thing at that point in time. But ultimately, when you look back in hindsight, many of the worst things that happened to us at that point in time are actually the best things when we look at it from the future, or when we look at it in hindsight.
My mother was always expressing her love. No boundary stood in her way. A simpler person than my father, she used guilt, martyrdom, terminal embarrassment, and vicarious identification with her children as manipulative tools, all without a second thought. Yet she was rarely gloomy, and we could always count on her love and support.
So again, guilt, right? Many parents use guilt. So she's totally operating on the left side of the grid to manipulate her children. But life, she lives on the right side of the grid. So she balances it out. But ultimately, I don't think it's a good idea to blackmail your children, right? You need to be empirical with them. That's what my view is on this.
My father had a good job as an industrial photographer, and although we always had plenty of food, money was very tight. My youngest brother, Peter, was born when I was 9. We had to divide 6 people into our small 2-bedroom garden apartment. Life in this small apartment was hectic and noisy, and I sought refuge in my books. I read endlessly when not playing baseball or basketball, my other childhood passions. I knew that education was my path out of the small town, comfortable as it was, and I was always first or second in my class. By the time I received a full scholarship to Columbia University, I was a serious and studious young man. Academic success continued to come easily. I majored in chemistry and was graduated with honors. I decided to become a psychiatrist because the field combined my interest in science and my fascination with the workings of the human mind. In addition, a career in medicine would allow me to express my concern and compassion for other people. In the meantime, I had met Carol during a summer vacation at a Catskill Mountain hotel, where I was working as a bus boy and she was a guest. We both experienced an immediate attraction to each other and a strong sense of familiarity and comfort. We corresponded, dated, fell in love, and were engaged by my junior year at Columbia. She was both bright and beautiful. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Few young men worry about life and death and life after death, especially when things are flowing smoothly. And I was no exception. I was becoming a scientist and learning to think in a logical, dispassionate, prove it kind of way.
So totally left brain oriented.
Medical school and residency at Yale University further crystallized the scientific method. My research thesis was on brain chemistry and the role of neurotransmitters, which are chemical messengers in the brain tissue.
So neurotransmitters are created by the brain. They're basically molecules which get created, and they actually also move around in the bloodstream, sending messages to the other cells, etc.
I joined the new breed of biological psychiatrists, those merging the traditional psychiatric theories and techniques with the new science of brain chemistry. I wrote many scientific papers, lectured at local and national conferences, and became quite a hotshot in my field. I was a bit obsessive, intense, and inflexible, but these were useful traits in a physician. I felt totally prepared to treat any person who walked into my office for therapy. Then Catherine became a Rhonda, a young girl who had lived in 1863 BC. Or was it the other way round? And here she was again, happier than I had ever seen her. I again worried that Catherine might be afraid to continue. However, she eagerly prepared for the hypnosis and went under quickly.
So again, hypnosis, right? If you're not willing to go under, then a hypnotherapist really will have a difficult time in taking you under, right? So it's not so easy to take anyone into a hypnotic state if you're not ready for it. So here she says that she was eager and she was ready to go into a hypnotic state very fast.
I am throwing wreaths of flowers on the water. This is a ceremony. My hair is blonde and braided. I'm wearing a brown dress with gold and sandals. Somebody has died. Somebody in the royal house. The mother. I am a servant with the royal house, and I help with the food. We put the bodies in brine for 30 days. They dry out and the parts are taken out. I can smell it. Smell the bodies. She had spontaneously gone back to Aronda's lifetime, but to a different part of it, to when her duty was to prepare bodies after their death. In a separate building, Catherine continued, I can see the bodies. We are wrapping bodies. The soul passes on. You take your belongings with you to be prepared for the next and greater life. She was expressing what seemed like an Egyptian concept of death and the afterlife, different from any of our beliefs. In that religion, you could take it with you.
So in Egypt, they pack and they put a lot of stuff with the in the burial chamber, right? The belief there is that whatever is there in the burial chamber, you can actually take it with you. Although in the Hindu culture, it is not there. I don't think in any other culture, it is technically there.
She left the lifetime and rested. She paused for several minutes before entering an apparently ancient time. I see ice hanging in a cave, rocks. She vaguely described a dark and miserable place, and she was now visibly uncomfortable. Later, she described what she had seen of herself. I was ugly, dirty, and smelly. She left for another time. There are some buildings and a cart with stone wheels. My hair is brown with the cloth on it. The cart has straw in it. I'm happy. My father is there. He's hugging me. It's Edward, the pediatrician who insisted she see me.
So now, again, we always come back. We operate in a soul group. This is something that we saw in Celestine prophecy. And also when we go into F27 in the programs, we always meet with a group of people who are going through the process of this learning or in this earth life system together, right? So naturally, the pediatrician in this life was her father in that other life where she has gone into right now.
It's Edward, the pediatrician who insisted she see me. He's my father. We live in a valley with trees. There are olive and fig trees in the yard. People write on papers. There are funny marks on them like letters. People are writing all day, making a library. It is 1536 BC. The land is barren. My father's name is Perseus. The year did not fit exactly, but I was sure she was in the same lifetime that she had reported during the previous week's session. I took her ahead in time, staying in that lifetime. My father knows you, meaning me. You and he talk about crops, law, and government. He says you are very smart and I should listen to you. I took her further ahead in time. He's father lying in a dark room. He's old and sick. It's cold. I feel so empty. She went ahead to her death. Now I am old and feeble. My daughter is there near my bed. My husband is already dead. My daughter's husband is there and their children. There are many people around. Her death was peaceful this time. She was floating. Floating? This reminded me of Dr. Raymond Moody's studies of victims of near-death experiences. His subjects also remembered floating, then being pulled back into their bodies. I had read his book several years previously and now made a mental note to reread it. I wondered if Catherine could remember anything more after her death, but she could only say, I'm just floating. I awakened her and ended that session.
So Dr. Raymond Moody was the first person to talk about near-death experiences and life after life, etc. And then, of course, there are many more authors who have taken it up. Many people have been having near-death experiences, and many people have written about it. So it's something that now is an accepted thing that near-death experiences are actually real. It's not been scientifically proved, but so much of anecdotal references are there that now it is absolutely accepted. So for those of you who don't know, a near-death experience is when a person actually flatlines. If you're connected with the monitors, etc., your pulse, that thing that moves, that zigzag thing moving, that totally flatlines. That means you're no more there, you've died, right? But then again, suddenly you come back and then again it starts to blink, right? Your pulse again starts. That's what a near-death experience is all about.
With a new insatiable hunger for any scientific papers that had been published on reincarnation, I hunted through the medical libraries. I studied the works of Ian Stevenson, MD, a well-respected professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, who has published extensively in the psychiatric literature. Dr. Stevenson has collected over 2,000 examples of children with reincarnation type memories and experiences. Many exhibited xenoglossy, the ability to speak a foreign language to which they were never exposed. His case reports are carefully complete, well researched, and truly remarkable.
So again, there are many stories and a lot of research has been done where people actually remember their previous lives. They go into the house of another person and they'll start calling people by name. They'll exactly know what was put. They'll go and sit in the chair that they used to sit in, etc., etc. And a lot of work has been done on this. Many of the people have been found to be in India also when they are reborn.
I read an excellent scientific overview by Edgar Mitchell. With great interest, I examined the ESP data from Duke University and the writings of Professor C.J. Dukas of Brown University, and I intently analyzed the studies of Dr. Martin Ebon, Dr. Helen Wambach, Dr. Gertrude Schmeider, Dr. Friedrich Lenz, and Dr. Edith Fio. The more I read, the more I wanted to read. I began to realize that even though I had considered myself well educated about every dimension of the mind, my education had been very limited. There are libraries filled with this research and literature, and few people know about it. Much of this research was conducted, verified, and replicated by reputable clinicians and scientists. Could they all have been mistaken or deceived? The evidence seemed to be overwhelmingly supportive, yet I still doubted. Overwhelming or not, I found it difficult to believe.
So again, so people who've not been exposed to the reincarnation theory, etc., they naturally will find it difficult to believe because it is something out of the boundaries. It is out of their belief systems, right? So you're thinking out of the box. In India, of course, we totally get reincarnation. We believe in reincarnation, and we know that reincarnation actually takes place.
Both Catherine and I, in our own ways, had already been profoundly affected by the experience. Catherine was improving emotionally, and I was expanding the horizons of my mind. Catherine had been tormented by her fears for many years and was finally feeling some relief, whether through actual memories or vivid fantasies. I had found a way to help her, and I was not going to stop now.
So again, going back to the memories and rehashing it over there naturally has an effect in the current life existence that we are going through.
For a brief moment, I thought about all of this as Catherine drifted into a trance at the beginning of the next session. Prior to the hypnotic induction, she had related a dream about a game being played on old stone steps, a game played with a checkerboard with holes in it. The dream had seemed especially vivid to her. I now told her to go back beyond the normal limits of space and time, to go back and see if her dream had roots in a previous reincarnation. I see steps leading up to a tower, overlooking the mountains but also the sea. I am a boy. My hair is blonde, strange hair. My clothes are short, brown and white, made from animal skins. Some men are on top of the tower, looking out, guards. They are dirty. They play a game like checkers, but not. The board is round, not square. They play with sharp, dagger like pieces which fit into the holes. The pieces have animal heads on them. Kyrgyzstan, phonetic spelling territory, from the Netherlands around 1473. I asked her the name of the place in which she lived and whether she could see or hear a year. I'm in a seaport now. The land goes down to the sea. There is a fortress and water. I see a hut. My mother cooking in a pot. My name is Johann.
So again, you can be a male, female, you can be your father of someone in this life, you may be a mother of someone in this life. Someone in your life may be your father, maybe your mother, maybe your lover. So it's all mixed up. Okay, there's no sure thing about. And ultimately, why are we here? We are here to experience as many experiences as possible. So naturally, we will be cast in many roles because we want to experience an overall experience.
She was progressed to her death. At this point in our sessions, I was still looking for the single, overwhelming traumatic event that could either cause or explain her current life symptoms. Even if these remarkably explicit visualizations were fantasies, and I was unsure of this, what she believed or thought could still underlie her symptoms. After all, I had seen people traumatized by their dreams. Some could not remember whether a childhood trauma actually happened or occurred in a dream, yet the memory of that trauma still haunted their adult lives. What I did not yet fully appreciate was that the steady day in and day out pounding of undermining influences, such as a parent's scathing criticisms, could cause even more psychological trauma than a single traumatic event.
So again, you see, when we are bringing up our children, we have to be very careful about how we communicate with the children. This is extremely important. This is something that we read about in Magical Child also, where the matrix system is there, right? Now, if you're constantly criticizing someone, then you're beating the person down and then it becomes a big problem. So you have to encourage, you have to deal with children from the right side of the grid. This is very important. And over here, he clearly states that even that criticism that parents shower on their kids or make their kids undergo is more, detrimental than even a very, very traumatic event, because this is like a slow poison, right? So we have to be very clear on how we talk to and communicate with our children.
These damaging influences, because they blend into the everyday background of our lives, are even more difficult to remember and exorcise.
Because again, it's a slow poison, right? It's happening all the time without any gap, and it's not one single event. So if you have a traumatic event, it's much easier to deal with than something that is happening day in and day out, and it just seeps into your life.
A constantly criticized child can lose as much confidence and self esteem as one who remembers being humiliated on one particular horrifying day. A child whose family is impoverished and has very little food available on a day to day basis might eventually suffer from the same psychological problems as a child who experienced one major episode of accidental near starvation. I would soon realize that the day in and day out pounding of negative forces had to be recognized and resolved with as much attention as that paid to the single, overwhelmingly traumatic event.
So we have to deal with all sorts of things. We are finding this in biofield tuning also. Simple stuff like changing a school, having a fight with a dear friend, someone, orchestrating you and isolating you. All these things start to rub off in a child, right? And they have to be cleared from the system.
Catherine began to speak. There are boats, like canoes, brightly painted. Providence area. We have weapons, spears, slings, bows, and arrows, but bigger. There are big, strange oars on the boat. Everyone has to row. We may be lost. It is dark. There are no lights. I am afraid. There are other boats with us, apparently a raiding party. I am afraid of the animals. We sleep on dirty, foul-smelling animal skins. We are scouting. My shoes look funny, like sacks, ties at the ankles from animal skins. My face is hot from the fire. My people are killing the others, but I am not. I do not want to kill. My knife is in my hand. Suddenly she began to gurgle and gasp for breath. She reported that an enemy fighter had grabbed her from behind around the neck and had slit her throat with his knife. She saw the face of her killer before she died. It was Stuart. He looked different then, but she knew it was he. Johann had died at the age of 21.
So again, right, she's saying Stuart is someone in her life right now, and she knows that that fellow had killed her at that time. Every one of us has an ID. In Far Journeys in Robert Monroe's book, he calls it an ident, where each of one has a unique code. It's very much like a cellular code that, the cellular phone, where when you make a call to someone, it lands on that specific phone because there's an ID of each chip which is there in the system. Like that, all of us have an ID. If we can want to search for someone, and this happens very much in the Lifeline program, you can actually go and locate that person in that space where we are looking for that person. If, of course, that person is in that space.
She next found herself floating above her body, observing the scene below. She drifted up to the clouds, feeling perplexed and confused. Soon she felt herself being pulled into a tiny, warm space. She was about to be born.
So again, many people feel themselves floating up from the body when they are leaving the body, and then you can immediately go into another birth also. There may not be any time difference whatsoever. We have to understand that when we are going into these states of alternate consciousness, then the way that we relate to time and space in this earth world reality is very different from how we experience it in the altered states of consciousness. Raghuji, you are unmuted. You have something to say? Raghuji? Okay.
Somebody is holding me, she whispered slowly and dreamily. Someone who helped with the birth. She's wearing a green dress with a white apron. She has a white hat folded back at the corners. The room has funny windows, many sections. The building is stone. My mother has long dark hair. She wants to hold me. There's a funny rough nightshirt on my mother. It hurts to rub against it. It feels good to be in the sun and to be warm again. It's, it's the same mother I have now.
So again, we may repeat the relationship in many lives. So a mother in that life is the same one that she has in this life.
During the previous session, I had instructed her to closely observe the significant people in these lifetimes to see whether she could identify them as significant people in her present lifetime as Catherine. According to most writers, groups of souls tend to reincarnate together again and again, working out their karma, debts owed to others and to the self, lessons to be learned over the span of many lifetimes.
So again, the group soul concept, right? Where you come here as a group. We all decide when we are there in that expanded state, when we are not in this earth life state, as to what are the experiences that we want to experience. And then we have a group of people who are willing to help us to experience those experiences, and we keep coming back together. So that's what the soul group is all about.
In my attempt to understand the strange, spectacular drama that was unfolding, unbeknown to the rest of the world, in my quiet, dimly lighted office, I wanted to verify this information. I felt the need to apply the scientific method, which I had rigorously used over the past 15 years in my research to evaluate this most unusual material emerging from Catherine's lips. Between sessions, Catherine herself was becoming increasingly more psychic.
So now this also happens when we are going into these altered states. It can start influencing our perception levels. How are we perceiving things, right? It can actually start shifting the way that things occur to us and what our perceptions are about people, right? So intuitive abilities start getting enhanced.
She had intuitions about people and events that proved to be true. During the hypnosis, she had begun to anticipate my questions before I had a chance to ask them. Many of her dreams had a precognitive or foretelling bent. On one occasion, when her parents came to visit her, her father expressed tremendous doubt about what was happening. To prove to him that it was true, she took him to the racetrack. There, right before his eyes, she proceeded to pick the winner of every race. He was stunned. Once she knew that she had proved her point, she took all of the money that she had won and gave it to the first poor street person she met on her way out of the track. She intuitively felt that the new spiritual power she had gained should not be used for financial reward.
So
For her,
now this is very important point, right? When we start bringing materialism into the spiritual aspect of what we are experiencing, the spiritual aspect automatically starts to diminish, right? So we have to be very careful when we deal with this.
for her, they had a much higher meaning. She told me that this experience was a little frightening to her, but she was so pleased with the progress she had made that she was eager to continue with the regressions. I was both shocked and fascinated by her psychic abilities, especially the episode at the racetrack. This was tangible proof. She had the winning ticket to every race. This was no coincidence. Something very odd was happening over these past several weeks, and I struggled to keep my perspective. I could not deny her psychic abilities, and if these abilities were real and could produce tangible proofs, could her recitations of past life events also be true?
So naturally, he is also questioning, right? Because he didn't believe in reincarnation.
Now she returned to the lifetime in which she had just been born. This incarnation seemed to be more recent, but she could not identify a year. Her name was Elizabeth. I am older now, with a brother and two sisters. I see the dinner table. My father is there. He's Edward, the pediatrician, back for an encore performance as her father. My mother and father are fighting again. The food is potatoes and beans. He's mad because the food is cold. They fight a lot. He's always drinking. He hits my mother. Catherine's voice was frightened and she was trembling visibly. He pushes the kids. He's not like he was before. Not the same person. I don't like him. I wish he would go away. She was speaking as a child would speak. My questioning of her during these sessions was certainly very different from what I used in conventional psychotherapy. I acted more as a guide with Catherine, trying to review an entire lifetime in an hour or two, searching for traumatic events and harmful patterns that might explain her current day symptoms.
So again, very much like remote viewing, where you have a moderator who actually guides you into experiencing whatever you're experiencing. So again, in hypnotherapy also, he is actually just guiding her, go forward, go back, look at this, look at that. So, okay, to take out more information from this experience that she is having.
Conventional therapy is conducted at a much more detailed and leisurely pace. Every word chosen by the patient is analyzed for nuances and hidden meanings. Every facial gesture, every bodily movement, every inflection of the voice is considered and evaluated. Every emotional reaction is carefully scrutinized. Behavior patterns are painstakingly pieced together. With Catherine, however, years could whir by in minutes. Catherine's sessions were like driving the Indy 500 at full throttle and trying to pick out faces in the crowd.
So naturally, this was moving much faster than any normal hypnotherapeutic session.
I returned my attention to Catherine and asked her to advance in time. I'm married now. Our house has one big room. My husband has blonde hair. I don't know him. That is, he has not appeared in Catherine's present lifetime. We have no children yet. He is very nice to me. We love each other and we are happy. Apparently, she had successfully escaped from the oppression in her parental home. I asked if she could identify the area in which she lived. Brennington, Catherine whispered hesitatingly. I see books with funny old covers. The big ones closes with a strap. It's the Bible. There are big fancy letters, Gaelic language. Here she said some words I could not identify. Whether they were Gaelic or not, I have no idea. We live inland, not near the sea. County, Brennington. I see a farm with pigs and lambs. This is our farm. She had gone ahead in time. We have two boys. The older is getting married. I can see the church steeple, a very old stone building. Suddenly her head hurt, and Catherine was in pain, clutching her left temple area. She reported that she had fallen on the stone steps, but she recovered. She died of old age in her bed at home with her family around.
So again, many times what happens is if you have aches and pains, like someone stabbed you in the back, for example, right? Now you have a pain in the back. When you go to the past life where that stabbing took place, the pain can disappear because now you know that it happened in a past life and it has no relevance in this life and it can get eradicated. So if in the session, her entity who was Catherine in that particular life fell and hit her head, then in this life when you're experiencing that trauma, it can have a physical impact on you also.
She again floated out of her body after her death, but this time she was not perplexed or confused.
So now this is important, right? When we know where we have to go, then naturally we will not be perplexed and confused. When we don't know where we have to go and we are going into new territory, that's when it becomes a little traumatic and we feel a little lost.
I am aware of a bright light. It's wonderful. You get energy from this light.
Now, this is also important, right? What we found it, and this is it happens in the Tibetan book of living and dying and in Tibetan processes where they actually prepare for death. And when a person is dying, they stand around the person and literally chant over there, go to the light, go to the light, go to the light, just to remind the soul that has left a particular body to go and actually find the light. So this is something, again, many ND people who have NDEs, near-death experiences, also experience that there's a bright light and they are told to go into the light, right? So this is another experience that she's having over here.
She was resting after death, in between lifetimes. Minutes passed in silence. Suddenly she spoke, but not in the slow whisper she had always used previously. Her voice was now husky and loud, without hesitation. Our task is to learn, to become godlike through knowledge. We know so little. You are here to be my teacher. I have so much to learn. By knowledge, we approach God, and then we can rest. Then we come back to teach and help others.
So again, the only thing that we are here for is knowledge, information, growing our state of consciousness, right? And that is what we take back with us. And when we have grown enough, some of us actually come back to act as teachers so that we can guide and point other people to the right direction. So most of the great teachers are like this. They have the ability to transcend and get out and go into the new system, but they choose to come back to help and support humanity.
I was speechless. Here was a lesson from after her death, from the in between state. What was the source of this material? This did not sound at all like Catherine. She had never spoken like this, using these words, this phraseology. Even the tone of her voice was totally different. At that moment, I did not realize that although Catherine had uttered the words, she had not originated the thoughts. She was relaying what was being said to her. She later identified the masters, highly evolved souls not presently in body, as the source. They could speak to me through her. Not only could Catherine be regressed to past lifetimes, but now she could channel knowledge from the beyond. Beautiful knowledge. I struggled to retain my objectivity.
So again, what happens is that when we are going into these altered states, we can connect with our guides much easier and in a more profound manner. All of us have guides. They're always there around us. The only thing is that we need to learn how to make the connection with them. They're constantly giving us messages, constantly in pushing us in the right direction as to what we had actually come to achieve here. But the point here is again very clear that we need to make the connection with them.
A new dimension had been introduced. Catherine had never read the studies of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross or Dr. Raymond Moody, who have both written about near-death experiences.
So again, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did a lot of research. She was a leading researcher at her time on death and dying. And in fact, she worked with Robert Monroe also. And with her, a series was created. It was called the Going Home series, where it's actually a CD set of 15 CDs. And in that, you have tracks for people who are going to pass on, especially in hospice people. And you have tracks for people who are the caregivers to the people who are going to pass on, taking them into these altered states to really understand what happens when you are transiting. So it was done in collaboration with Elizabeth Ross Kubler. Uh, she came to the institute many times.
She had never heard of the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
So
Yet,
again, there's Tibetan Book of the Dead and Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. In these books, they actually put out how you should die, what is the process of death. So actually, Tibetans, they practice the process of dying as to what will happen after they die, what are they meant to do, etc., etc.
yet she was relating similar experiences to those described in these writings. This was a proof of sorts. If only there were more facts, more tangible details I could verify. My skepticism fluctuated yet remained. Maybe she had read about near death research in a magazine article or had seen an interview on a television show. Although she denied any conscious remembrance of such an article or show, perhaps she retained a subconscious memory. But she went beyond these previous writings and transmitted a message back from this in between state. If only I had more facts. After she awakened, Catherine remembered the details of her past lives as always. However, she could not remember anything that happened after her death as Elizabeth. In the future, she would never remember any details of the in-between states. She could only remember the lifetimes. By knowledge we approach God. We were on the way.
So again, so she's not remembering the between life, right? What happens in the interim period before you die in one life and before you are born in another life, right? We can stop here. This chapter is over.